Good morning, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the SP&R Committee of Perth Kinross Council on Wednesday the 13th of June. I'd like to welcome you all here, and do we have any apologies?
No, Convener, we have no apologies.
No apologies? All present correct. Excellent. Do we have any declarations of interest on any of the items before us this morning? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. A non-financial interest in respect of Paper 5 as a council-appointed director of CPK.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shires.
A non-financial interest in Paper 5 as chair of the Sport and Culture Advisory Group.
Okay.
Paper 5 as well.
Paper 5 as well. Okay, Councillor Forbes. Okay, we then go into minutes, and the minute of the SP&R Committee of the 18th of April for approval. Okay, agreed. Do we have a copy to sign, or do we do that at a later date? Thank you. Thank you. For noting the minute of the meeting of the Executive Subcommittee of the SP&R Resources Committee of the 24th of April, the minute of the Chief Executive Appointments Subcommittee of the SP&R Committee on the 14th of March for noting, the minute of the meeting of the Chief Executive Appointments Subcommittee of the SP&R Committee of the 26th of March for noting, the minute of the meeting of the Chief Executive Appointments Subcommittee of the 24th of April for noting, the minute of the Chief Executive's Appointments Subcommittee of the SP&R Committee of the 3rd of May for noting, the minute of the meeting of the Chief Executive Appointments Subcommittee of the SP&R Committee of the 22nd of May for noting, the minute of the Property Subcommittee of the SP&R Committee of the 25th of October for noting, the minute of special meeting of the SP&R Property Subcommittee of the SP&R Committee, apologies, for the 15th of December, 17 for noting, minute of the meeting of the Provost Subcommittee of the SP&R Committee of the 28th of March for noting, minute of the Economy and Lifelong Learning Outcome Delivery Group of the 8th of December, 17 for noting, minute of the meeting of the Economy and Lifelong Learning Outcome Delivery Group of the 23rd of February, 18 for noting, and the minute of the meeting of the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee of the 8th of December, 17 for noting. Yes, sir.
I wonder, Convener, if it's at all possible that the committee might be updated on any recent developments or none as regards the Tay Cities deal. Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dugan. Just briefly from my own perspective and what I'm aware of, we've had several meetings, as you may be aware, between the councils involved, which are Angus, Perth Kinross, Dundee and North Fife. As far as progress is concerned, I now know that everyone's full attention is on the Tay Cities deal. The Stirling Cities deal having been completed about 10 days ago and signed off, so we're now able to focus on that. As far as my own efforts have been concerned, I have met with David Mundell, the Secretary of State for Scotland, on 2 occasions in the last 2 weeks, and I have met with Lord Duncan on 2 occasions in the last 3 weeks to discuss the Tay Cities deal and to try and extract as much funding as possible for this area. I'm also aware that John Alexander from Dundee has met with Keith Brown, MSP, on 2 occasions, I believe, to do the same. And we're at the moment trying to pull everything together, and we hope to have a meeting with all the councils, and I have said that we would be happy to host that in Perth and Kinross and try and do that within the next 2 weeks, really to formalise our priorities and to try and lever more funding than what is projected at the moment, because every time I've heard another prediction, it's south of the one I've heard previously, to be fair. So I think it's time we sort of recharge their batteries. and try to get more funding for Tay-Cities. There's still a huge amount of money, a significant amount of money. It will be of significant benefit to all the regions involved, but it is important that we try to leave it in as much money as possible. Thank you. We then move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the authority to write off debts and obsolete stock. This is an annual report, and it seeks your approval to write off both debt and obsolete stock from the 17-18 financial year. Although the Council endeavours to collect all the debt due to it, and we have a very good record in doing so, there is inevitably occasions when this is not possible. On a like-for-like basis, the levels of write-off today are broadly similar to last year, reflecting the ongoing work undertaken by our services to maximise income collection. To put the overall situation into perspective, the total income from the Council's 7 main income streams amounted to over 220 million in 17-18, and the report requests writing off just over 1% of that figure. Council tax levels remain among the best in Scotland, with over 97%. This further underlines our reputation for strong and prudent financial management. Significantly, members should note that the number of taxpayers opting to pay by direct debit has continued to grow in 17-18 and now stands at over 75%. This method of payment is clearly more efficient and more cost-effective for collection for both council and customers. This further demonstrates our commitment towards improving the collection rates. Furthermore, if we look at the amount of council tax billed since 1993 of almost 1.6 billion, the proposed write-off represents 0.03% of that total. I can also assure elected members that the alternative methods of collection and recovery are being investigated at every opportunity in order to keep future write-offs to a minimum. Councillors should be aware that whenever new or additional information is received by this council that allows us to recover debt, then charges will be reinstated and collected. The paper also includes proposals to write on debt, which will contribute to reserves going forward. Are there any questions? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. Paragraph 2.2.5 on page 45. Could someone perhaps give clarity on what costs is it met by the Scottish Government, and what is the pool mechanism? In other words, do we get money back for the money that we can't collect, or what does that mean essentially? Thanks.
2.2.5. Okay, Scott. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. The pool mechanism is a guaranteed funding to the Council. When we receive our funding announcements in December of each year, we are advised that we will get a minimum amount of non-domestic rates funding from the Scottish Government. So what we do at the year end is we either pay in if we've exceeded that target, or we receive additional funding if we've not exceeded that target. So it's really a guaranteed level of funding.
Thank you, Convener. You've already mentioned that we are doing relatively well, I think, across the country for council tax collection. I assume there must be a league table of some sort, and can I ask if there is, and if so, where we are on that league table at the moment?
I'm not aware of it being published for the current year yet, but normally we sit around about second of the mainland authorities. The islands tend to do better, but in terms of mainland authorities, we're right up there at the top.
Sorry, just to add to that, yeah, the figures are usually announced every June. They haven't come in this year, but last year, as Scott says, we were second equal along with Angus Council, only beaten by 0.1% by Orkney Islands Council.
Move on to paper 5, Cultural Trusts Transformation Project. This is outline business case and next steps. This report sets out the scope for a transformation review of 2 cultural trusts, Horsecross Arts and Culture Perth Kinross. It asks you to approve the scope and approach to the review, and note the recommendations will come back to this committee at the end of November. In presenting this report, I want to note the excellent work carried out by both these organisations across Perth and Kinross. However, we must also recognise that the operating context for Horsecross and Culture Perth and Kinross has changed since they were first established. Our level of ambition for culture has increased hugely, and this vision is central to the economic growth of this area. It is right that we consider what kind of delivery structures we need to achieve this ambition. We also need to achieve more corporate efficiencies from all our services which we fund, and act whenever we can to protect frontline investments. The board and staff of both Horsecross and Culture Perth and Kinross have been briefed of this review and are actively participating in it. I am very grateful for their engagement and their involvement. Any questions on this report? We'll start with Councillor Donaldson.
Before I make some observations, I do want to ask some questions. And it's really so that we can set out what are the terms of reference and the parameters. The first question I have is this. It states, and I just quote, on page 67, where key decisions require elected member direction, these will be reported to the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee. And later on, under page 74, it also states the final decision will be taken on the 28th of November, but the SP&R committee will be kept updated. Can I then ask, will there be an interim update on this report after quite a bit of the research and analysis has been carried out for SP&R on the 12th of September? And that would also give scrutiny and possibly audit the opportunity to look at this as well, because I think it's that important. Will there be an interim update on the 12th of September?
Mr. Valentine. Sorry?
Yeah, I'm happy to take the question. I think it would depend very much on where we got within the process. I think if there was a substantial amount of work that had been done and we felt there was something that was worth reporting back, we could report back in September. But it would depend how quickly that we got through the process.
Do you want to? No, that's fine. Okay. I mean, given in mind that this is interim as well, this is not the first report on this subject either. I would hope that we're in a position, and if we are in a position, I will certainly try to deliver that report in September. But if we're not in a position, I will.
The reason I ask is we have 5 options here, and what hopefully we might be able to do by September at least is to whittle down those options, and so we've got more focus on what we're going to do. And I suspect the fundamental question is whether we have a single cultural trust or continue with the status quo, probably updated for circumstances. I now want to ask Head of Legal, because I think we should look at this just now. It may be part of the inquiry. The last time the Council took legal advice on this was in early 2017, early last year, and that's before the Bartley Review. One of the options is to set up a Scottish Charitable Incorporated organisation, a scale. That means you wouldn't go through Companies House. Although both organisations are companies regulated, but I think it's by guarantee. Setting up a scale, would that set up a completely new legal entity? That would be a new legal entity. Okay. Secondly, let's say we don't go down that route, but we would continue with we have two charitable organisations just now. They're both companies limited by guarantee, that's the term. Both have Scottish charity numbers. If they were to merge, I would be right in saying they would have to have only one charity number, and one would effectively, I hate the term alio takeover, but effectively one would have to be subsumed by another, or would it be a completely new
What you would be doing in terms of the reconfiguration of these two trusts is creating a separate entity which would be registered accordingly. So it's not really a case of one trust taking over the other, it's about redesigning a single unitary trust to cover the myriad of functions that are currently set up within the two trusts. So it would be an independent entity as opposed to a takeover.
So that would effectively be a new legal entity in its own right. Okay, can I turn now to page 64? And this is what I'm driving at. It states the 2017 Bartley Review, and I remember being at a presentation at this, my brief time on the Tayside Joint Valuations Board, and that was back in June, July of last year. And it goes on to state there, but no new alios or properties transferred to existing alios after 1st of April 2018 will be eligible for relief. Now, we've established here, if it's a scale, it'll be a new entity. It being restructured, merged together, is effectively a new entity. Have we taken any kind of legal advice since early last year? And I just simply ask, after the Bartley Review was announced, and it's quite clear that 1st of April would be a cut-off date, why we didn't take legal advice earlier on. Because if it's not, it seems to me very clear that if it's this new organisation is not going to be exempt, then really any putative savings are going to be offset by what we lose on non-domestic rates.
I don't think the position of taking any legal advice would actually alter that. That's what's going to have to be taken into account as part of the options appraisal in terms of looking at what the risks and benefits would be of each of the models and actually doing the number crunching at the end of that. I mean, the position as stated by the government is that no new alios would be eligible. I don't know whether or not there would be specific grounds or cases to be made, but without knowing what the option actually is that we're going to seek advice on, then all we're left with is the information and the legal position that we currently know.
But just to conclude, what we are talking about here is, be it a scale or be it a merger, it's setting up a new alio.
I think Oscar would insist on that.
Fiona?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Donaldson. I think just to add to what the Head of Legal Services has said and what hopefully is clear in the paper, I think there are two reasons for doing this review. The first is, exactly as the report says, we need to look at what's the right delivery model for the future. The operating environment for the current trusts that we have has changed very significantly since 2015. That's the primary reason. There is also, I think, the national context. So you may be aware that Audit Scotland have recently published their latest report on alios. One of the things that report says, arguably the most important thing that it says, is councils need to review alios regularly, need to be clear about the reasons for having them, and to be certain and satisfied that they are the best value way of delivering services. So this is a good time to be doing the review. The 5 options that are in the paper are intended to be, and it's important, I think, that we are completely open-minded about what the future delivery model might be. You are quite right to say, and the Head of Legal Services has confirmed, that any new alio will not be eligible for non-domestic rates relief. So it may be potentially that we need to consider keeping one of the existing structures in place in order to benefit from the tax efficiencies that the current alios get. But we don't know the answer to that yet. That's why we need to do the review. A SCIO may be a suitable future model. It exists elsewhere. It may not be. But the purpose of the review is to look at all the options at the moment and see what's best for the future.
I think Councillor Donaldson, my understanding of is that we are having a review, and possibly the Head of Legal Services has given you one outcome from that review, but we are still reviewing all the outcomes in the paper, is my understanding. Scott.
Thank you. If I could just add, I raised this issue at a Directors of Finance meeting last year. The advice we were given by the Scottish Government is that Perth Kinross, there will be a line drawn in the sand towards the end of November 2017, and that will be the amount of relief in the Perth and Kinross area. So we will have that pot of relief to apply to any new ALIOs.
Okay. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to sort of seek some further clarification on the kind of ongoing progress monitoring for the review. It's kind of customary for these sorts of transformations to be examined by the modernising governance. I can't see that it would fall at all within the remit of the audit committee, and the idea that you might have conducting scrutiny of an ongoing review would seem unusual, if not sort of slightly bizarre to me. So I just wanted to get some clarification on how the ongoing progress monitoring of the review would take place.
Thank you. My understanding would it would be my member officer working group.
It would be.
Yep.
Sorry, if I can just add, yes, as a major service redesign proposal, each member officer working group would consider progress with regard to this piece of work.
Okay. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. My question is in relation to the options appraisal process.
Sorry, no, I said Councillor McCall, which is my inability to articulate properly. So my apologies. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. My question is regarding the instrumental music service. It's not included. It's not in the scope. Can you give me an idea of what the advantages are of retaining that rather than putting that forward for this?
Thank you for the question, Councillor McCall. We looked at this quite carefully when we did a review of these services last time round. The reason why the instrumental music service isn't in scope is because it is primarily an education service delivered in schools, and therefore the tax advantages of moving that service into a trust outweighed the savings of keeping it as an in-house service.
Okay. Councillor Sheila McCall.
Thank you, Convener. My question is around the options appraisal on clause 2.5 on page 65 and 66. I would like to ask what is the evaluation criteria and weightings that each option will be evaluated against, and to ask why it's not been included in this paper.
Thank you for the question, Councillor McCall. The broad criteria when we're doing transformation reviews tend to be pretty similar, and they include things like ability to improve the customer experience, and that's fundamental for this review. As with all service redesigns, it's about looking at how audiences have changed and customer needs have changed in the 3 years since we last reviewed these services, and what that means for the future service delivery model. The ability to deliver the savings within the Council's required timescale, and there is a saving of £150,000 attached to this review, which was approved as part of the Council's budget process earlier this year, and also acceptability, and that's where work with stakeholders, in particular the boards and staff of the two LAOs themselves, is important. The project team for this review has begun some preliminary discussions in advance of committee meeting today. Its first task, assuming that the scope of this review is approved by this committee, will be to develop the criteria, the sub-criteria, which will be informed by the information gathering phase, which is underway. Excuse me. And the project team will agree those criteria, sub-criteria, and any weighting in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Thank you. If I may, yes. Well, as a minimum, then I would like to see the evaluation criteria and weightings brought back to the committee in September, so at least the rest of the elected members can review those. It's very unusual to start a project with this scope, I would suggest, without having these in place already.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Convener. I may be being a bit obtuse, but back to the NDR question and formation of ALIOs, I think I had 3 different answers from the 3 lead officers. from what came from head of legal, head of cultural service and the chief accountant. There didn't seem to be any consistency of the approach that we would be taking to this, because we heard it wouldn't be subsumed in one into the other, it would be a new alio. Then Fiona suggested that they could be subsumed, and then we're reading that it would not affect the NDR, and Scott was saying it wouldn't affect the NDR, but he'll obviously have greater knowledge. The question really is, how much NDR, the horse cross and CPK accrue at the moment? What is the value in monetary terms of the moment of the NDR?
Scott?
Sorry, I don't have that information today, but we can certainly get that back to you.
Well, I'd like a ballpark figure today, because I think it's pretty important, because if we look at the overall savings we're going to achieve and take it against the possibility of losing the NDR, I think it's vitally important we would know that.
I think
Councillor Lang, thank you for the question. The answer in terms of NDR relief, which is currently accrued, is over £330,000. Most of that is attributable to Culture Perth and Kinross, just for the simple reason that they manage more buildings. Horsecross just manage the concert hall and the theatre, and whilst they're big buildings, they don't actually have that much or as much NDR relief attached to them. I think the answer really to the question that you're raising is in terms of Barclay and the wider tax efficiency question, because it's not just about NDR, in terms of looking at how these models will operate or how culture services will be delivered in the future. There's also VAT to consider, because the ALIOs, as you'll know, are currently able to claim back VAT on some things but not everything. So I think there's a broader question, and NDR is part of that, but it's not the whole thing. I think we don't know in detail yet how and if the findings from the Barclay Review may have a permanent bearing on the way that ALIOs work in future. The Audit Scotland report that I mentioned a few minutes ago alludes to that. As I say, that's why we need to do the review, and we need to be really clear about, as far as we can, about what is the most efficient and effective way to run these services in the future. You'll notice that one of the other options, which we haven't explored in depth at all, but which we know other councils are looking at, is hybrid delivery models, where some councils have looked at bringing services back in-house. Now again, there's no foregone conclusion about that, but we need to put everything on the table, look at it, understand, as I say, the wider tax efficiency question, and then come back to committee with solid advice.
Supplement. So when it comes back to committee, we'll have all these figures of the tax benefits and disbenefits, and that will be an integral part in the scope of coming to the
probably
decision.
the main point of having a review.
Well, I didn't see any real mention of that in the review.
Coming back, this committee would make the decisions at the end of the day, or full council.
Yes, and I'd like to think that we'd have the whole financial implications over the broad range of things. Not we're just the only figures in here we're talking about is savings that we have to achieve, but not about the disbenefits of the NDR. There's no figures in there.
I would anticipate that to be the case as part of the review and the appraisal going with it. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, it will have to, because you will need to make you need to be able to make an informed decision. So all of the information, including the financial consequences of any proposed option, will need to be before elected members, and that will come out in the final evaluation and the final report for you.
And that will cover all 5 options?
Yes.
Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Convener. I think it's good that we're looking at more than just the sole member company single trust option or the status quo. But it's been mentioned that we want to look at all the options and have everything on the table. So I'd just like to ask why the option of a single culture and Leisure Trust has been excluded from the scope of the review. I note what it's been said before that it wouldn't, in phase one, wouldn't have achieved the required savings within the timescale. But we've now moved on from that. We set up CPK and managed to realise a lot of those savings. But I think it would be good to look at all of those options at the same time if we do end up, as other councils have done, going down the route of having a single culture and leisure trust at some point. Does it make sense to do this in 2 stages and set up one and then have to set up a further ALIO or something later on?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Purvis. We did look, the option of a single culture and sport trust has been looked at twice before by this council, once back in 2011, as I understand it, and then we looked at it again in 2015. I think what's important here is getting a delivery model that suits the local circumstances of the local authority area. Glasgow Life, which is probably the biggest example of a sport and culture trust, was set up for very particular reasons, one of which was the 2014 Commonwealth Games and need to have a single delivery model with all the right skills in one place to meet, you know, the very significant challenge and opportunity that the Games presented. When we looked at the options back in 2015, and that was a pretty comprehensive options appraisal, I'm happy to make that the background information on how we carried that out last time available to the committee if it would be useful. The issue with that option was the scale of structural change involved to bring Live Active Leisure and Horsecross Arts and what was then an in-house council department but has subsequently become Culture Perth and Kinross together. Structural change is expensive, it takes time to deliver, it creates uncertainty and can be quite demotivating for staff, and it doesn't necessarily achieve time and cash and other efficiency savings. So at that stage, our view was, and our advice to council was, if you were starting from a completely blank sheet of paper, yes, you would look at this, but actually, given the local circumstances that we have, this isn't a suitable option for Perth and Kinross, and that remains the position.
Thank you. Any further questions? Good. Councillor Duggan.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. It's just, excuse me, it's just to seek some clarity perhaps from the Chief Executive about her additional advice to Councillor Lang, where I think maybe it was said that we were embarking on a major service redesign. It's just to get assurance that in actual fact what we're looking at is an objective options appraisal.
Sorry, thank you very much, Councillor Duggan. Yes, absolutely. Essentially what we are asking you for is to give us authority to proceed to undertake this review. And we already have guidance within the council around options appraisal, etc., which colleagues must follow, albeit that Fiona said that we need to adapt that in response to Councillor McCall's question about criteria. But it is treated, this review is treated as we would any major service review, any service redesign. And so therefore we need to comply with the best value guidance, we need to comply with option appraisal, the process needs to ensure that people are consulted, etc., etc. So in that way it is considered a major service review. The outcome may not be any fundamental change, but our approach to this is consistent with how we would undertake any major service redesign. And also in response to Councillor Lang's question, as is normal practice, you have to have the financial assessment of any options because you need to be in a position to be able to determine what's in the best interests of the council. And finance is one aspect of that, but there will be other aspects of that too. So we're not prejudging the outcome of this, we're asking for authority to proceed and to ensure that all of the options are properly examined, and you as elected members will want to be assured that you have the full information before you in order to make that informed decision.
It's a reassurance, Convener, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Okay. I think we've got to realise that just because other councils have gone down a certain route, both either culture and leisure trust or just a pure cultural trust, that doesn't necessarily mean that we go down that route. I am glad that it looks as if we will get a proper update come the next SPNR meeting on the 12th of September. I think we do need more facts, more figures, more definition, before, and then we can assess before the final decision on the 28th of November. I think the other thing to stress is this is not just about the non-domestic rates relief situation. That's clearly a vital factor. But the last administration did carry out phase 1 of this project. They then stopped. And I think primarily, I wasn't on the council at that time, it was primarily due to difficulties at Horsecross. But I think it's important to point out, Fiona Robertson has stated at that time, you know, they also took the view that structural change is expensive. It also can be demoralising for staff. If that's the case in 2015, then I'd submit it could be, unless it's handled extremely well with a single trust, be the case in 2018, 2019. There's also factors we've got to include. One, on pensions. From what I understand, Culture, Perth and Kinross are under the local government pension scheme. Most of the staff, maybe not all, that doesn't apply with Horsecross. I think we've got to allow for the fact that both trusts are carrying out different functions. And there's a real danger, it seems to me, that if we go for, but I've got an open mind, we'll look at all the options, that one trust, in particular museums and libraries, could suffer as a result, as the poorer cousin. And I think there's also, we've got to look at the question of external funding. And it's much more likely that external funders will give to two separate trusts. And I think in particular of the Ganachie Trust. And clearly, you've got the AK Bell Library. So we've got to take that into account. Would we lose funding from those external sources by going for one trust? I think it's this belief sometimes that bigger is better, that you get economies of scale. I actually think there's also at times, and very often in the corporate world, it is the case, that takeovers, that mergers don't work. That instead what you get is diseconomies of scale and you end up with poorer morale. I hope that's not the case, but we really, in such a key decision, need to get more information. I think it's unfortunate that we did not take legal advice after the Bartley review was announced last year, because I think that might have narrowed down the options at an earlier stage. That's all I want to say.
Thank you for your advice, and I'm sure members will take cognizance of it, or councillors, officers will take cognizance of it. Councillor Lane.
Just a comment. I think there's a lot of work to be done by the officers between now and November, September or November, and I think that there will be a lot of pressure on them as well as we're trying to improve the cultural offer and if we have movement on the city's deal. So I wish them all the luck, and I don't think they'll be having much recess for Fiona and her team. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lane, for your positive comments. Development of the creative exchange in the former St John's Primary School. Finlay Kerr is a project manager with this and is going to give us a short presentation, I believe.
Slides forwarded. It's just a visual.
Yep. Okay. If there is. Do we have them ready or not? We don't have them ready. Okay. That being the case, we'll move on. The ambition for the creative exchange is to create a hub for business innovation and enterprise in the creative industries in the heart of Perth, which will nurture creative activity. The development will deliver 26 artist studios, 13 offices for creative industries, hot desking, a teaching room and a project space, an innovation lab and a cafe. This project has been developed in partnership with WASPs. WASPs are highly experienced in developing and managing properties such as this for artists and the wider creative industries. The substantial physical regeneration and repurposing of the former school will cost 4.4 million in total. The Council's capital commitment of 2.7 million has leveraged further funding from the Scottish Government, from European Regional Development Funds, the Ganachie Trust, Tay-City deal negotiations, which are still ongoing. It has also attracted £500,000 of private sector sponsorship from the Edrington Company. The Innovation Lab, to be known as the famous Grouse Ideas Centre, was launched earlier this year in its temporary home at the AK Bell Library. It is already having a positive economic, social and cultural impact. Councillor officers aim to conclude the final contractual tasks this summer to ensure a start to construction on the site in September 18 and completion on the site in August 19. It is envisaged that the creative exchange will have a positive impact on economic, social and cultural levels, as well as the obvious physical improvement to the building. Have we any questions on the report?
Just
had his hand up first.
Okay, that's fine. It's like the tennis, you gave me the eyes. And
sorry, Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I'm delighted to see this project moving ahead. Hopefully it will fill what is currently a little bit of a hole in that part of the city. Can I ask, though, how will progress on the construction phase of this, or the refurbishment phase of this project be reported back to SPNR? And once completed, is there any intention to have anything like annual reporting where the progress of the creative exchange hopefully its success will be reported back to the council, so the success of our investment can be monitored? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Jim Valentine, sorry.
The project itself, Councillor Parrott, would be reported back through the normal capital reporting, through the Strategic Investment Group, and then back to SPNR. So it would be reported as it progresses. And in terms of the ongoing success, it would be reported back along with all our other cultural initiatives.
Okay, Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Convener. I was just wondering if you had any, if you could give us an insight and update on how likely the Tay-City's deal funding of the £1 million will be coming forward, so that it will not have to come from the Housing and Environment Service budget.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, Councillor Lang, as Councillor Lyle said earlier, the city deal, there has been no announcement yet in terms of the funding. What we've done with the funding at this moment in time is we've taken it out of the overall cultural projects portfolio, and until such time as the deal is confirmed, it will remain in the council part of that portfolio.
Thank you, Convener. I welcome the private sector investment that's mentioned under the famous Grouse Ideas Centre, and I note that that's already underway at the AK Bell Library. I just wanted to ask, is the continued sponsorship over the 10-year period, is that already committed, or is that subject to the negotiation that was mentioned that will happen while we firm up budgets in the summer?
Thank you, Convener. No, Councillor Bailey, the funding is committed for the 10 years. We have that guarantee from Edrington.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I too am delighted to see this project moving forward. It's nice to see my old school coming back to life. And I have seen the slide presentation at a scrutiny committee, I think. So I think if it's possible to make that available to members across the council, I think that would be really helpful because it's very impressive. My question is in relation to the ongoing property maintenance. I understand from the report that it's going to be leased at £1 per annum to WASPs, but the infrastructure maintenance costs and any other sort of extraordinary costs that might be associated with the fabric and the upkeep of the building itself, it's silent in the report as to who's responsible for that. So I'm wondering, is it in the SLA with WASPs, or is that responsibility retained by the council?
Mr. Valentine? Is it? Okay. Stephen Kerr.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Yes, that is actually being addressed in the lease, and hopefully the report is clear that it will be on the basis of full and repairing and ensuring lease. So WASPs will take on all liability after the development.
Thank you. Councillor Duggan.
Thanks, Convener. A couple of questions, please. When this all started, I was convener of housing and very much wanted to turn St John's into affordable housing, and took some convincing otherwise. However, I was convinced when I saw the excellent work that was undertaken by WASPs elsewhere in Scotland and the economic and artistic benefits that accrue to the localities and the cities that have these facilities in them. So, but that enthusiasm has been tested by the delay that we've got. However, it's much to be welcomed that we're at this stage just now. My question is, can we have an update on, or a projection of, rather, the benefits that will accrue to Perth and Kinross from this cultural presence in the city? And also, can we have some officer guidance on the standard of the building, or any deterioration of the building since it was vacated as a school?
Okay. Mr. Valentine first, and then possibly
I'll
Mr.
start, and then
Yeah.
bring in Finlay and Fiona, particularly with regard to the deterioration in the building. I think the cultural presence in the city, there is demand. There is demand for artist space. We know that. It's demand across Scotland, not just in Perth and Kinross. We think it complements as part of the Taste City deal, and we think it ties in with our cultural aspirations for the city. Fiona might want to say a bit more about the detailed demand that there is, so pass over to her, and Finlay can pick up on the questions about the building.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Duggan. I think in terms of measuring tangible impact of this level of investment, it's very ancient history now, but when we did the City of Culture bid, we actually wove this project into the impacts that we said to UK government would be delivered. They are around meeting demand for artists and makers, local artists and makers, to have studio space. That is about a space in which to be creative, but it's also a hard-edged thing about space to establish what in most cases are micro businesses. The research that we undertook told us that we've got a lot of creative folk in the area, but most of them are one-man or one-woman bands, and it's quite difficult for them to establish and make their creative idea flourish and take it to scale, and this project is absolutely central to that. Another impact which we looked at quite hard was career paths for our young people into the creative economy. There are very, very few modern apprenticeships in the creative sector in Scotland as a whole, and there are currently none in this area, and the Creative Exchange will help us address that. I don't have the specific targets that we set to hand, but I'll gladly send you those with Finlay's help after committee, so you can see what we were, and we built this into the Taste City deal proposition as well, what we promised to deliver through this investment for local talent.
Okay. Comments on the condition of the building would be the other thing.
Yes, if I can just make a few points about the condition of the building. As you know, the building's now been vacant for almost 7 years. And while we've made every effort to ensure that the building has been secure. It has been attractive, maybe over the last 14, 15 months for thieves and vandals, unfortunately. And every effort was made to close up after every entry, but there's a lot of windows and a lot of potential access points. So there has been some damage at vandalism, broken windows, panes within doors throughout the building, which has added some cost. I don't have an exact figure, but it's probably in the tens of thousands, unfortunately, to the overall project. And there has been some theft, which actually then disrupted asbestos because it was around piping work and so on, which has added further cost and delay, unfortunately.
Okay. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. I think it is worthwhile looking at the 12 specific economic benefits that are listed in the report, which will flow from the project. I think one of those items which might inform an answer to Councillor Dugan's question is the gross value added of £2.8 million over the 20-year lifetime of the project. I think importantly, it is providing that hub and that arena in which creative people can get together, where ideas can coalesce. And where economic benefit and future job opportunities, retention of creative people in Perth and Kinross can flourish. So I think there's a lot to be said in favour of the proposal, in addition to the tangible regeneration benefits and the dealing with an empty building that's been subject to antisocial behaviour and criminality in the past. This is a beacon of creativity moving forward, and I think we should all get behind it. Thank you.
It was thank you, Convener. It was just a comment. Having had the privilege of being asked along to the launch of the famous Grouse Ideas Centre in the AK Bell Library some months ago, I was taken by the enthusiasm and vitality and eagerness for this project. The creative industries are worth somewhere approaching, or indeed possibly in excess of £100 billion to the UK economy. And there's a close alignment between creative industries and innovation in the economy more generally. I think that this administration and this council's support of both the Creative Exchange project and the investment in the physical infrastructure demonstrates our commitment to economic development and diversification. And I'm very happy that we can agree this paper today.
Thank you, Convener. As you know, I do have a little bit of experience in the creative sector, and it troubles me somewhat to see highly talented individuals leaving this area to go off to Glasgow or Edinburgh, Liverpool or Manchester or wherever. So I think this will retain creative people in this area, which I think will be good for the economy. And if I can just very quickly paraphrase 4.2, I think the officers are absolutely right to say that creative people would generally not engage with a local authority, and by commissioning someone like WASPs is a good way to bring them all together. So I'm delighted that this is going ahead, and thank the officers for their time on it.
Thank you. Section 2 of the report describes how the local action partnerships will be advised by grant panels for each ward in the local action partnership area. On the basis that the advice of the LAPS will make recommendations to this committee on how the fund is used. The report also recommends evaluation at the end of the year one. This is so that we can evaluate and improve how the fund operates in year two and ongoing. Councillors, the Community Investment Fund represents a new way of working for all of us. I believe this increased focus in community empowerment and choice is one we should all endorse. Ultimately, it means more informed decisions about how finite public money is to be used, and that can only be a positive. I'm happy to take questions. Councillor Donaldson.
Clearly, with this fund, a lot of thought was given before the revenue budget motion was passed on the 22nd of February. Can I ask why it's taken some well nigh 4 months for the criteria for this fund to come before the council and to be decided upon? It seems an inordinate amount of time, and we're now well into the financial year.
See, we've only actually, this is only the second committee possible where it was, and given that we were 2 months since our last committee meeting, it doesn't seem to me to be the case, Councillor Donaldson. It's been the first opportunity we've had really to bring this paper forward.
Right. Obviously thought, though, was given before the budget motion. Can I just ask then another question? It's not specifically on this fund, but it raises a broader question. And that's in the revenue budget motion at the end of February. We set up a number of other, almost what you might call pots of money. Enterprising Rural Perthshire Programme, the Tourism Routes Fund, non-recurring small town retail facade fund, town centre management fund. Now, it's a question I asked at Environment. I'm going to ask again, when, and given that some of these funds are only for 1 year, they are non-recurring, when are we going to get the criteria for those funds as well?
I'm aware some of the money has already been spent, Councillor Donaldson.
No, it's about the criteria for those specific funds.
When are you going to get? I'll go for Mrs. Renton.
And thank you, Councillor Donaldson, for the question. As I explained at E&I committee, sort of officers have been working, on, sort of the criteria for this, but it's a very small team, and there are a number of, other commitments that we are working to as well. So the plan is to bring the criteria as soon as we possibly can, either to the next committee or potentially an executive sub of E&I committee.
Just one final question, because it does seem to me the administration itself, in terms of the direction it gave to officers, we've got a number of funds here. It's almost as if we're taking old wine, putting it into new bottles to show this all these bright new shiny funds. The problem is that some of those bottles, we don't even have labels on them yet.
Thank you for your question. It didn't quite come over, is that? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I refer to paragraph 2.6 on page 98. Line 2, it refers to, I assume it refers there to small grants, not small assessment panels. And in the context of it being small grants, I recognise, firstly let me say I welcome very much the availability of these funds to communities. And I also recognise the need for proper accountability in the use and disposal of these funds. But given that they're all small grants, or many of them may be small grants, are we not inappropriately perhaps overburdening SPNR with double checking the work of a grant assessments panel and a local area partnership? And I just wonder whether it might be appropriate for there to be some form of executive subcommittee to SPNR if that's the route chosen, or whether it might be limited to, say, grants, individual grants of only over £5,000 needing further scrutiny. Because after all, we do actually properly disperse a certain amount of funds through the participatory budgeting without further assessment. Thank you.
Yep, I will just, point well made. And I think that's the whole point of having a review at the end of year one, where we can assess, which is, in my view, a slightly cumbersome process at the moment, and we may be able to streamline it. And that's the whole point of having a comprehensive review after the first year of this project. This is a new project. Inevitably, with any new build, there are going to be snagging, and we're aware of that, but it's really important, in my field, to empower the community to be involved in the decision-making, how funds are spent within their community. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much. If I can, excuse me, say something about the process in response to your question, Councillor Parrott, and thank you very much for that. We do, as you have said, have experience of participatory budgeting. This takes that process beyond that in terms of the extent of the funding. And I guess what we are saying as officers that we want to be cautious in that new approach and ensure that there is effective governance, and that the SPNR committee, which has responsibility for managing the council's budget in between budget council budget setting days, has oversight of these recommendations and is comfortable with both the process and the decisions. And we would want to, for sure, avoid duplication. And it may be that we get to a point where there's further devolution of responsibility. But what we are saying is, until we get there, what we are recommending is that there is this grants assessment panel who can do quite a lot of the work. And together with the local action partnerships, recommendations will come forward to the SPNR committee. Now, we've no idea how many recommendations, we've no idea how many applications for funding we will receive. And it may be that if the volume is significant, you may feel that an executive subcommittee of SPNR may be appropriate. Or indeed, if there's a few of large sums, that can be accommodated within the normal business of SPNR committee. So I think it's difficult to anticipate, but the important point is that this committee has the final say. This committee has the oversight of the decisions with regard to the funding.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Convener. First of all, I welcome this money to be dispersed if it is done properly and correctly. I think that's. I think what you've set up.
Inferring that we would do it improperly.
Well, I think that I would like to compare and contrast here. I think that this is you've set up the officers have set up a means of checking it in the first term to see how it works. And I welcome that, and I contrast that to what happened for the fund that was for the new business initiative, or whatever it was called, the events one, where a third of the fund was given out before, at the same time as the criteria, and there was a bid in, and I've had people writing to me, and I'll speak to officers from scrutiny, writing to me in my role as a convener of scrutiny about how, this is people from Crieff saying how an organisation in Crieff with councillors on that board had a bid that went in at the same time and was awarded at the same time as the criteria were made. And so I think this is a lot more better set up. My question is, there's two questions. We've already heard it's a small team, and there seems to be a lot of officer work that's going to have to go into this. I was wondering if there was any calculation done and how much officer time there will be overseeing and helping the process through, and do we have enough people to do all that for all the various laps, and then they're going to help set up the committees and that as well. It seems a lot of officer time. The other thing is, we're now into I'm trying to remember the month. Yep, we're in June still. This money.
It's the Highland show next.
Might be July before this meeting's finished. The question really is, will the monies, the 600,000, if they're not dispersed by the end of the financial year, as with all these pots of money that's been alluded to earlier, will they be carried forward, or do they disappear at the end of the year to be replaced by funding for next year? It's really to know just what happens with the money, because I can't see it all being spent. If we look at the local action partnerships, there's maybe the chief accountant could tell me how much we have unspent by the local action partnerships as an example of how I don't think we'll spend all this money before the 31st of March.
Thank you. Fiona Robertson.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Lang. On officer time and capacity, yes, you know, there's a finite number of hours in the day. However, the Stronger Communities team, which works, as you know, under the leadership of David Stokoe, works on an ongoing basis with not just the local action partnerships, but a whole range of community organisations. So a lot of the support that's required to disperse this fund is work that is very much core business for them. They have the networks, the connections and the knowledge. We will assess that, and that will be part of the evaluation that we'll bring back to committee at the end of the year. On your question about, you know, what happens if the money isn't all spent by the end of the year, there is provision in the medium-term financial plan to carry forward monies. But I think the bigger point there is actually around, you know, the success of the fund. Part of the job of the local action partnerships and of officers is to promote the fund and the opportunity that it represents for communities. So if we don't have, as the Chief Executive have said, we don't really know what the scale of demand will be. But if that varies across localities, or there's anything else that looks, you know, slightly unusual in terms of low take-up, then we need to think about what that means and how we can improve the way the scheme works in year 2. You know, this is a very new way of working for all of us, and I think we need to recognise that.
Councillor Duggan?
Could I just supplement to that?
Right.
It was just, it was a thanks, convener. I was just asked the chief accountant how much funds are left unspent in the. That was my original question in the action partnerships. But it was really to say that that's really useful to know that the money's carried forward, because my fear was that we run around looking for schemes to get rid of this money before the end of March, and then it's coloured into how good the scheme is. So it's reassuring to know that the money can be carried forward. And I take it that if there's no further money 2 years down the line, the second year's tranche of money will be able to be continued into 2020-21.
That money's committed. That fund of 1.2 million is committed.
And will not have to be spent in that financial year.
That would be my view.
That's grand, thanks.
Scott.
Thanks, Councillor. So at the 31st of March 2018, there was £312,000 left earmarked for area action partnerships to go forward.
Okay.
Thanks, that seems quite a lot of money unspent.
Thank you for your comment. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. 2 questions, if I may. The first one is that the paper doesn't outline anything around how the 1.2 million will be divided up between local action partnerships or between ward areas. Do we have some information on that, or is one area open to applying for all of the money just to play one scenario?
You mean one ward?
One ward, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Council agreed that it was £50,000 per ward, so we're assuming that the 50,000 goes to each ward. I think it would then be a matter for the local action partnership if they wanted to do anything differently.
Okay, great, thank you. And then my second question is that the paper proposes we set up this new body in the grant assessment panels. However, for me, this fund strikes me as being somewhat similar to the Community Environment Challenge funds, where the ward members write in support of an application and it comes to E&I. What was the logic for not using that mechanism that's already in place and already somewhat tried and tested for this pot of money? Why are we inventing a new system where we have a tried and tested one that is for a very analogous pot of money? Thank you.
Chief Executive.
Thank you very much for the question. I think, genuinely, we are proposing something that's a slightly new process, consistent with a new fund. And as the convener has said, absolutely we need to review this going forward. What we were keen to do was 3 things. First of all, recognise that the community empowerment legislation is with us, and that there is more that we need to do to comply with that by way of empowering communities, so enabling communities to make decisions that affect them, you know, and their futures. The second thing was to recognise the important role of elected members, and we did discuss elected members then expressing a view at a ward level in support of applications, but we actually wanted to make it more meaningful than that. So to have communities and elected members at a ward level discussing what's coming through with officer support. And we felt that that might be more meaningful because then what we have is we have the representative democratic element through elected members, but also sending out a really important signal of moving to greater participatory democracy and complementing both. And then to bring all of that together and to ensure my third strand is effective governance. So, you know, this hopefully will work. May need to be tweaked. We may need to evolve it into something different going forward. But genuinely, it's an attempt to ensure that we're bringing the various strands together and that this can be a meaningful process for everyone who's involved.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Convener. It's a couple of follow-up questions to answers that have been given, and then one of my own, if that's okay. The first one is a response that was given to Councillor Bailey in terms of the allocations to each ward within each local area partnership. And I think the response said that the outline proposition is £50,000 per ward, and if the local area partnership believes it should do something similar, it has the authority to do that. So I'd just like to just double check that that is accurate and under what circumstances that might be.
Yes, Councillor Dugan. The council agreed it was 50,000 per ward. I think if the partnership agreed, and that would include the local elected members agreeing that there was some project or something that they wanted to transfer money into, I think that would be a matter that you could come to some agreement on. But I think ultimately the council agreement was for 50,000 per ward. You're absolutely correct. So I think the starting point is 50,000 per ward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And the figure I think that was given by Mr. Walker was that there's currently 375, was it, unspent? 312. And that's out of a pot of, what was the original figure? What was the original budget?
I think it's come from a number of sources. If you recall, we received a refund last year from a third sector agency. The council put money into this area over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
We also got Scottish Government funding last year, which we were drawing down first in order to, because it had to be spent by the 31st of March. So, I mean, I can get a detailed breakdown of the history.
That would be helpful because, and I don't underestimate the challenges that we have in this area, and I think we should recognise that this is an imperfect and uncharted ambition that we're pursuing in Perth Kinross, and it's essentially a noble one. I think we're doing quite well at it. The final question, Convener, is paragraph 2.7 on page 98 indicates that the grant panels that's proposed are going to be chaired by a ward elected member. Has any thought been given as to how we arrive at which particular elected member is going to chair that panel? Well, yes, but who are the demos that will apply that democracy, Convener? Okay, that's fine, thank you.
I think, Convener, we might welcome a positive comment, if that's all right. I think this is a great paper, and no one can fault the ambition. I've self-evidently been around a while, not just generally, but in this building. And the two things that we need to be careful of is that we need to be patient with something new. I think we're all jumping the gun a little bit here. The important time will be in a year when we evaluate all this. But when we look at how good this has been for the community, there's 152 local groups have benefited from it. We wouldn't want to feel that we were nitpicking at little bits and pieces, which presumably will all be gathered up in the evaluation. So it's really just to stress for the public who seem to like this idea, that this is a good idea, and it's an innovative idea, and I think the thing that the partnership will have to continue with is to do innovative things, and you have to try, and sometimes might not work, and as council do, they may be imperfect, but this is a good news story and a good thing, and we should be shouting this one from the rooftops, because the public out there are very, very pleased to receive the funds, and I think also very pleased to participate. Not only do they get the money for their pet projects, but at some of the participatory budget events, there's been an opportunity to network. They've met other groups, and they've had other benefits as well. It's not just all about money; it's about community involvement, and this has to be a good news story.
Thanks, Convener. It's great to see concrete evidence that this administration's commitment to decentralising power and resources to communities come to this committee so soon after the budget decision to approve a community investment fund in February of this year, and only 3 months into this financial year. I think in these severely financially constrained times, it is commendable, a commendable achievement that a fund of £1.2 million can be established to support and deliver community-led projects over the next 2 years and possibly longer. To be honest, I think it is remarkable that Councillor Donaldson wants to nitpick on what's written on the label of the bottle when the SNP wouldn't provide any bottle or didn't have the bottle to provide a community fund in the first place. And in terms of multi-year funding, I'll take no lessons from Councillor Donaldson's party, the party which failed to deliver 3-year funding for our voluntary sector parties, which this administration did in its budget. So don't give us stories about uncertainty over single-year funding when your party is still wedded to that, Councillor Donaldson. I'm pleased to see that the evolution of our local area partnerships will be taken another step forward under this administration, with a say over additional resources of £50,000 for each ward, which will address some of the concerns about geographical funding that have arisen through our strengthening and developing of participatory budgeting over the last year. As I said at the budget, and again at the Perth City Action Partnership on Monday evening, I want to see some of this resource augment local PB efforts, and I know that the Perth City Action Partnership is up for that challenge, and how that money can be used to support delivery of the local action partnerships, priority actions and better local outcomes. Convener, with regard to paragraph 2.16, as convener of the Housing and Communities Committee, can I say that I am very open to and welcome the suggestion that we examine the effectiveness of the Community Investment Fund and the role of the local action partnerships in building community participation in as constructive and supportive fashion as we are able. And I'm very happy to support the recommendations of this report. Thank you.
I just want to echo some of the comments that have been made by partnership colleagues. I think this is a very welcome initiative and signals a real shift in approach for this administration. We want to make sure that communities are able to determine more about how money is spent in their local areas and set their own priorities. In particular, I'm very encouraged that the community councils will have a strong involvement where they exist, because I think that often in other initiatives they've been somewhat ignored. So I'd like to welcome that as well. And I think it is important that we review this after a year. There's some very good points that have been raised on all sides. And this is a new and exciting initiative. And obviously we can learn from this process when we look at it again next year. So I very much support the paper.
Just a comment, Convener. I think as a council taxpayer of Perth Kinross, I'd be really concerned about the comments of Councillor Simpson talking about pet projects. And this is the whole worry why we have to have proper scrutiny of these, and we cannot give award funds of up to £30,000 to what some people might construe as a pet project before it had even been assessed or gone through the assessment criteria. I think that was a very telling comment by Councillor Simpson, that this money would be going toward pet projects.
Thank you for that. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Convener. Back when this administration took control, Councillor Campbell was challenged on a number of occasions by Councillor Dugan regarding what our vision was
I remember that on becoming a regular comment from Councillor Dugan. And this was precisely the type of project that Councillor Campbell had as our vision. It was about getting away from the perception of the SNP previous administration that Two High Street knew best, and actually devolving power down to communities and making community empowerment a genuine reality. And as regards to Councillor Lane's comments about pet projects, I can certainly speak from my own ward experience, where Blairgowrie as a community has been working on a town plan for a number of years, but a large part of the problem was a lot of their projects that were sitting under that £50,000 threshold, they were asking the council for funding, and the funding was not there coming. So this is actually an opportunity for communities such as Blairgowrie and Rattray to actually deliver the things that they've had on their shopping list for quite a while. So if that's a pet project, then I'm quite happy to accept that. But actually these are real projects that will make a big difference to the community. So in the absence of Councillor Campbell, I would say that this is exactly the type of thing that Ian was talking about when he talked about our vision as an administration. And I was pleased to hear you pronounce it a noble path, Councillor Dugan.
Convener, thank you. I'm glad that somebody from the administration was listening to the comments that I made, because in actual fact, despite this slightly maniacal politics that we've heard over the last 10 minutes, mostly from Councillor Barrett, the fact is, I gave in my response to a comment made by the Chief Executive that this is a difficult thing to do. This is community empowerment, actually driven at governmental level by the SNP. This is community empowerment, and it's participatory budgeting through our action partnerships. I said it was a positive thing and it was a noble thing. So when we apply scrutiny to the deployment of a substantial amount of public money into our communities, regardless of the mandate under which we do it, it demands scrutiny, and the SNP is here to apply that scrutiny. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. I take it we agree the paper. And given the comments that we've had across the floor, I welcome the positive reception to this paper, and I look forward to all elected members, maybe with one exception, Councillor Donaldson, as you're raising your eyes to the ceiling, but generally across the floor we've had a positive reception to this. Okay.
Councillor Dugan's right. A lot of this has come from the Scottish Government. We welcome it, but it's how it's implemented, and we do have that role.
As with anything, as I said, any new build, there will be snags, and we anticipate that, but I welcome the positive comments from across the floor and look forward to the successes that it will bring and the review we have in 1 year's time.
Just a very brief comment. Thank you, Convener. Obviously, political differences across the Chamber sometimes intrude into our deliberations. I think what we are at risk of losing sight of is that this administration and this council has delivered a £1.2 million fund in the budget setting process that was agreed back in February, and that the applications to use that money will be led by communities. They will be led by taxpayers and residents of Perth and Kinross. They'll be led by community groups and projects and community councils. And I am very happy that we are able, as a council, to deliver this fund, because I know that within my ward, and I'm sure within the wards of all elected members around the table, communities are champing at the bit to be able to access this funding and to deliver the projects locally that they know best are needed in their local areas. And I'm very happy that we're delivering that fund and delivering that project today.
hopefully, this is just to really provide examples of what the transformation programmes are actually delivering, rather than you just having the rather dry report every quarter. So this is about what we're actually delivering, and these will be posted up on the website along with other videos as the transformation programme continues to come to fruition.
Home First was fully implemented on the 1st of April 2017. The savings that we set out to deliver have been achieved. We've reduced our overall portfolio of temporary accommodation from 210 to 90. We've reduced the number of households in temporary accommodation from 213 at the end of 15-16 to 100. We've significantly reduced the number of days that people wait for their homeless decision to receiving an offer. In April 2016, the average wait was 441 days. That has significantly reduced to 77 days. So that's a massive change. In order to deliver on these outcomes, we've significantly increased the number of lets that we make to homeless households from 51% to 67%. And we've significantly reduced the backlog of homeless cases. On an ongoing basis, we always had about 500 to 550 homeless households waiting for accommodation. We've reduced that, and we're currently sitting at our lowest recorded number ever of just under 100. So we're not finished yet, we've got further improvements to do, but so far we think progress has been really good, and we're really pleased with the work that we're delivering.
The Online Services My Account project is one of the projects that the digital transformation team in IT are doing, and it's part of the overall Council's transformation programme. It's a customer portal that customers can access through the Council's website to access these services, and it just means that they don't need to phone us up, send us letters or go into a council office. They can just access those services at their own leisure 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Advantages are it's quick and easy to use. A customer can report at any time, a day or night, 24 hours a day, even at the weekends when it's impossible to get anyone from the council. And they're kept in the loop, given a reference number so they can easily track what's happening.
Because it's so simple, it's everything's done push button. Instead of the system we had previously, where it was even something simple as reporting a missed bin, it was a convoluted process which involved going through admin, going through another person. We'd all have to say who's done this, who's done that. Now it comes directly to a person, picks it up, and I only get involved if there's an actual issue. So it saved me a lot of time.
Yeah, it was good to see all aspects of the process from start to finish and how it's come about, and especially dealing with IT and you know, going through the various aspects of what we do that they might not have seen and what they do that we don't see, and it was good to work together and come up with a process that benefits everyone.
Working with the team down at Friarton has been fantastic. They are a great bunch of guys, as I'm sure you well know. So no, it's been a great experience working with them. I think once we got their attention, so to speak, get them on board, it just makes that process so much easier.
Thank you very much. The report before you provides information on 3 key areas of transformation: an update on progress of the 17 projects contained within our transformation programme, feedback on our successful Can-Do Challenge bid to develop a pilot smart energy network for the PKC estate, an update on collaborative working with Dundee City and Angus Councils. The transformation programme is focused on continuing Perth Kinross Council's proactive approach to public service reform. It includes 17 projects from across all services developing new ways of working to maintain high-quality services while achieving a challenging scale of savings. The Can Do Innovation Challenge Fund is a national fund which supports the Scottish public sector organisations to find and develop innovative solutions to operational service and policy delivery challenges. The Perth Kinross Council Smart Energy Network bid has now been approved and is now being developed. Collaborative work with Angus and Dundee councils continues to explore opportunities for collaboration across 10 areas, including HR, payroll, IT, commissioning and procurement, to create more effective and efficient services. Please note the contents of this report. Do we have any comments? No. Agreed? Comments? Questions? You have a question?
It was just for an update on the commercial, the revenue from i.e. roundabouts, etc. I was wondering if there was an update on that.
On what, sorry?
The way I put it, but I'm glad we've got somebody who can interpret my use of the English language.
Commercial sponsorships, right? Sorry? Yep. Chief McNamara.
Yeah, the latest position with that is we're rescoping the scale of the activity. There's additional savings targeted around that, around events, which makes it a bigger project than was initially envisaged. The income from activities such as roundabouts, we're also now are doing advertising in various car parks in Perth and Kinross as well. But I think perhaps as I've relayed to yourself previously, there is some disappointment with our partner, which is providing this service, and we're currently looking at pursuing alternative measures around that one. So the income targets aren't quite as well as we would have projected, but we have recognised as an issue and we're taking affirmative action around that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. My two questions relate to paragraphs 2.2.2 and 2.2.3 on page 106. I'm delighted to see that we've had a successful bid to the Can Do Challenge Fund. I suspect given that we had a 25% success rate, I suspect that's good. I don't know the total number of bids, but I suspect it was challenging, and we've done well to get one out of that. The intent of the scheme, I think, is fantastic, but can I perhaps suggest that we look a bit further? I'm aware that there's another very large government department that is selling space on its sites, and it has more than a few, to a firm that is basically running large ISO container-sized batteries, and they buy from the grid and sell to the grid and make their profit from the differential pricing. I'm just wondering whether we have land too, where we can get involved with the same or another company to go beyond our present scheme, but actually give them space, get a ground rent from them, and I think they also, if you buy your electricity from them, they offer you a reduced price as well. I just wonder whether we can expand this battery element beyond storage of what we generate ourselves to going into an arrangement to provide wider storage using spare land that we have. Thank you.
Okay. Good question. Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Parrott. I think there's a variety of schemes that we are considering as part of this bid. I think we will take what you've said on board, and we can look to see where the potential is for that. One of the issues we have is this funding comes in a lot of different streams, and it's trying to retain all these funding streams together into something that's cohesive, that not only covers Perth and Kinross, but perhaps the wider Tay Cities area as well. But we'll certainly take the comments that you've made on board, and we can explore that further.
Absolutely. Okay. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you. Just a quick question for some reassurance. On page 115, we read the good news about the developing the face-to-face services with customers and encouraging people to use MyPKC, which I find an excellent organisation. But I would like some reassurance that we we don't lose sight of those people who may not be able to engage in that way. There are people out there who are still unconvinced the internet will catch on, or they may not be able to be linked up for some reason. And although we're making savings introducing this very good system, that we are also taking into account those people who may be marginalised and aren't able to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Yeah, I think we're aware of the fact that people need help and assistance to access the new technology, and where they don't have access to new technology, other routes are available. But we do see a big transfer in our transactions going forward.
If I may, I'm right in saying then that we're making all these savings here actually leaves the people who still do the face-to-face stuff actually more time to deal with these more vulnerable people. Would that be right?
There's an aspect of that, yes, but there's also a savings target.
Okay, thank you. Can we agree the paper? Agreed, thank you. We now move on to paper 9, procurement update. The report details progress by Perth Kinross Council during 17-18 in respect of delivering our 3-year procurement strategy, which was published in December 15 originally. The annual reporting on procurement performance became a statutory duty following the implementation of the Procurement Reform Act 2014. The financial year 17-18 is the first year in which the duty is applicable to Perth Kinross Council. The update includes information about the progress made in respect of the aims and objectives set out in the strategy, how these demonstrate value through purchasing decisions taken for the period 17-18 and include 1.9 million of savings recorded to date. 2 highlights of the work undertaken in 17-18, including making use of a new procurement procedure known as a dynamic purchasing system to contract with the transport providers for school and public transport, resulting in a 1 million reduction in the budget required to deliver this fund. Our supplier engagement work means that 73% of businesses holding a council contract are SMEs, and we continue to build business feedback and build into the contracting work that we do. This report has been prepared with reference to the published guidance on the duties arising from the 2014 Act. Procurement reports published within 4 months of the end of the financial year will be included in an analysis that will inform the Scottish Minister's annual report on procurement activity in Scotland. Any questions or comments? Question?
Thanks, Convener. On page 7 of the actual report, page 138 of the pack, there's mention of 129 community benefits being delivered out of 375. I just wondered what they could tell us about the balance of that figure in terms of how and when they'll be delivered, and what work is there ongoing to marry up benefits that communities want and providers of those benefits. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. In respect of community benefits that we track, as a tender comes in from contractor, we add all the community benefits. So the bigger number is everything that we're currently tracking. And at the point of the 31st of March 2018, where this report was drawn from, we had tracked the delivery of the 129 at that point. The remainder continue to be in development, and we are working with the contractors that have made that commitment to marry those up to the right place in the community. An example of what's still to come are, say, work placements for young people who are still in education, and those have a particular time in the year where that's most relevant. So those sort of things are still to come. There's a number of different examples of things to come. And we don't count something as complete until it's fully delivered. So we may have the promise of an apprenticeship, which may be in delivery, but not fully delivered as yet. So those are the sorts of things still to come.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Agree the paper? Agreed. Thank you all very much for your attendance and patience this morning. end the meeting.